Hi, and welcome to The Working World. I'm Keryn Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham.
Jamie, we just did a recording with Mark Bicocchi from Hilton Worldwide. Wow, what a, I'd say, stoic individual who has just survived the last 18 months in a really, really tough sector.
I think survived is the perfect way to put it, Keryn. I mean, Mark has been at the epicenter of COVID, particularly in hospitality, managing, so many properties over so many countries and a huge expat population, dealing with so many moving parts in a situation where I think he said he went from 75% occupancy globally down to 10%. And so obviously the financial constraints, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to hear that for any business, right? And then, touching on some of those points we talked about around the hotel quarantine process and their involvement in it. But it does sound like they're starting to turn the corner a little bit, starting to focus on staycations, CleanStay initiative.
Yeah.
It was really great to hear that they were looking at the future of work and looking forward.
Yeah, and I'll just preface this show with the fact that I'm actually in Broome. As we know, you got to be adaptable when it comes to COVID. My remote journey is no exception. I was in a cafe. There was quite a few people around, so I thought we'd do it in a car park here. So you'll notice there's a fair few four-wheel drives and buses, etc. Nonetheless, great show. I think it's such a wonderful individual, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. Thanks, Jamie. Okay. We look after yourself. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, perfect. Hi, Mark, and welcome to The Working World.
Hi, Mark. Welcome.
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Keryn. Great to be with you guys from across the globe. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Mark, for joining us. We're super excited to have you on board and hearing about what Hilton's doing, especially in relation and response to the pandemic and mobility more generally, which I know you lead the team there. I wanted to jump straight in and get started with kind of picking apart, the border closures subject, and I guess how that's impacted labor shortage, which I know has a big impact on the hospitality sector, getting people to work across that sector and even into the US itself. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience around that?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. And it's nice to be with you guys and have a little discussion around this, particularly at a time when things are, I'd say, with Hilton and hospitality finally looking up a bit and turning the corner, where we're pretty excited about that. And we've seen even in the past few weekends, particularly on Memorial Day weekend, which is a holiday that we have here at the end of May, have our occupancy rates up in the 90s. So that was in the U.S. at least, and so that was wonderful to see. And we see it's picking up a lot in APAC as well, and then we're expecting more throughout the world shortly, but yeah, we particularly with closing borders and some of those things and travel restrictions and all of that, we have seen a decent amount of labor shortage, particularly here in the U.S. And I think what kind of drove that was when the pandemic hit, you went from our sector and our industry getting crushed, obviously, with low vacancy rates, a lot of layoffs that we had to make throughout the company, not just on corporate but hotel operations side, hotels closing, and then furloughs and things like that. And then once the government started to kick in with helping out and providing a lot of assistance for businesses in general and hospitality, restaurants, any small family-owned businesses that were serving, gyms, things like that. And then, of course, hotels. What tended to start to happen was workers who were on the front lines, whether it's front desk, housekeeping, directors of HR, people within HR, finance, dishwashers in the restaurants at the hotels, people in those positions what started to tend to happen, we've seen it even more recently in the last 3 to 5 months, is as the government was kicking in and helping out these folks who had been on furlough, there wasn't as much a desire to come back to work. And so, in many instances, they're getting paid more by the government than they would be in their job. We were brought in from a mobility perspective to kind of see, hey, is there anything we can do to help find talent somewhere with these, lower skilled positions, and then maybe move them or relocate them. But it was very difficult to even come up with a solution, because in many cases, just the relocation itself would be more than the salary that they would make in a year. Now, we have helped out in a few situations where we could, but we are seeing just overall that labor shortage. I think it's starting to get a little bit better once the government. It's a hard double-edged sword, because the government has been helping out in providing help to our workers and citizens, but at the same time, if it's better being home and collecting, a check or collecting assistance, then what's the point of then going back into work? So I think a lot of that assistance will stop soon as we get closer to getting back to normal. Mm-hmm. And then those jobs again will pick up. But it's, like I said, it's a tough balance, and we're just hoping to see that a lot of that will come back, because in our hotels, there have been instances where they've had to send guests away because they didn't have enough staff at the hotel to fill it up. So it has become a problem here in the US, and we're trying to see if there's ways even we can bring in talent from overseas to come in for some of these jobs too. So we're working on that from an immigration perspective as well.
Interesting.
So, Mark, I think that is a global situation. I mean, you're in such a vulnerable industry, in that if there is another lockdown, and I know that definitely in Australia, we've got clients who are in the hotel business, and they've resorted to actually continue to keep paying their staff, because they're worried about, if there's another shutdown, these people will leave. They've found there's been a lot of people leaving the industry. But I suppose what I'm wondering is, how did you deal with your people in other countries? Because I know you have a large expat community that you move globally. And so when the pandemic hit, what was your response to those individuals? How did you work with them? Did you move them home? Did you keep them here? Did you give them finance? I mean, I'm just curious on how that sort of worked, because that would have been one hell of an operation just on its own. I'm sure that was a full-time job.
Yeah, no, great question. And there was a lot that we had to do and partner up with a lot of our folks in global security as well, just to kind of make sure we had a good snapshot of where everybody was and what they were doing and what their family situations were, and all of that. And we have expatriates spanning the globe. As you know, we're in 160 something countries and with the hotels, and so we're pretty much all over, and our expat population is about 500 or so that are under our purview that are on formal international assignments. But then there's another 4,000 to 5,000 that are what we kind of call expat and kind of don't. And what I mean by that is that it's pretty prevalent in the Middle East, actually, where we have folks that were hired from a neighboring country to come in and do work, but they're kind of getting expat related allowances and things like that ongoing without an end date. So it's a pretty good deal for some of those. But yeah, we just kind of had an all hands on deck. I mean, the moves themselves were kind of slowing down a bit, but we sort of went into kind of a mode of just ensuring that our folks were safe. They're in place. We partnered up, like I said, with global security to ensure where people were. We had, in addition to just, making sure that they're okay and they're in the same location where they were, there were some areas in some countries with a lot of political unrest going on, as well as, people kind of freaking out in different areas naturally. So, And so we had to kind of get on top of that and see. There were some cases in certain countries, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, where we had to repatriate some folks back to their home country and try and get them out of there as soon as possible, because they just didn't know what types of restrictions would exist, and what kind of lockdown that the government was going to put in on them there. So yeah, it really was an all hands on deck exercise. But what we saw, I think, most out of all of it was that we came to find out that a lot of people, or team members, as we call them, were moving on their own without letting us know. So they were going back to countries where they may have had family, or where they may have been from. And I think everybody was just in a crisis mode at the time to try and get back to wherever felt comfort, or comfortable. And so we'd find out later on that they might all of a sudden be in a new country where they didn't let us know. And so the work's being done there. So now we got to figure out from a tax perspective where there's exposure. And of course, immigration wise as well, assuming, in most cases they were a citizen of that country that they returned to. But our roles, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, but our roles in mobility certainly changed a bit or shifted a bit into other areas of expertise as these types of things occurred. So
yeah, it's exactly what I was going to ask you, Mark. Obviously some of that the work that fell out of those unplanned moves, or that, I guess that's what they used to call a stealth expat, not so much these days, but yeah, all that tax work, or like location tracking work that had fallen out of the crisis of the pandemic. I know you and I have talked previously around, it kind of brought you right back to your roots. You pulled up the sleeves and picked up the phone and you were looking for people, right? Like literally looking for people. And I was going to ask you, outside of the obvious tax fallouts of those discoveries, how else has your mobility team and your role changed in relation and response to the pandemic, and what your future work will look like moving forward?
Yeah, no, great question, Keryn. I think, it's changed for everybody in the industry in some form or fashion. But I think for us, one of the big things was, so we have a very small team at Hilton in mobility of 3. And so it's myself, and then we have one manager in the UK, and then one manager here in Northern Virginia in McLean at our headquarters. And then we liaise out with a lot of the compensation and benefits folks that work at our corporate offices in Singapore, Dubai, Watford, and Miami. So we tend to rely on them for mobility related tasks where we can, beyond the 3 of us. And then we also partner and liaise with a number of other folks in just benefits in general, even retirement. And as you know, mobility touches so many areas. So we do rely on a lot of people, but it's a small team. And so both of my colleagues on the team were furloughed, unfortunately, for 6 months during it. So I was kind of running a one-man show for 6 months, and it was I learned a lot. I mean, it was a lot. I mean, we did what we could. Like I said, that the moves themselves internationally were slowing down, and really there was only a couple that we had managed that needed executive approval to really go through, because there was an absolute necessary need. But then along with that, you had to deal with a lot of the quarantining when they arrived. And so it was a lot of stress on those people. And that's why mental health has just become such a huge topic, as you both know, I'm sure, in the industry and really everywhere within HR. But yeah, the roles definitely changed. We got added on because of furloughs and layoffs in legal. We took on the U.S. Immigration Administration, so that came to me, which we had not been administering before. We were administering global immigration with our suppliers, but not U.S. inbound. It had belonged to legal. So that moved over. That person unfortunately got laid off, and that moved over to me. We also took on international benefits and the management of that. So all of our expats that are on benefits plans, when they're on assignment, used to be managed by our U.S. benefits team. That came over to our team as well. Mm-hmm. So we really went from not just a three pillar. I always say we're kind of three pillars: tax, immigration, relocation. We added a fourth pillar of international benefits as well. And then I'd say a lot of, so while managing those four pillars, I'd say by myself at that time, there was also just the aspect of doing things that a lot of great people on our team who unfortunately were laid off, I had to perform a lot of those tasks. So rolling up the sleeves and doing things like invoicing, billing, a lot of just entering data into systems for, opening up new immigration cases and matters and things like that. So, it was one of those things where like you're in a career and you think to yourself, oh, these are things I did back in the day, but it really humbled me in a way, because it was a time when everybody just had to pick up the slack and do what they can to keep the boat afloat. So I just kept thinking, I'm just so lucky to have a job right now that it didn't bother me. I was okay with it. And, there were a lot of people that I think, if you weren't familiar with some of the billing process, it's so arduous and tedious. And I think we've all done it at some point in our lives, or paid a bill and you got to go through different approvals and stuff. But, it wound up being just, again, like a big rolling up the sleeves and just getting back to basics and doing some of those things. And today we're still doing the same. I was lucky enough to get my two colleagues back on the team in late October. I was very thankful for that. They came back, ready to go. And I told them when they came back, our roles are going to change a little bit. We don't have people who unfortunately have been laid off to do these things. So right now we're not hiring, we're not making any money, we're losing money. So all we can do is embrace change. And that's what we did. And we continue to take on some of those tasks with enrollments and data entry and paying bills and things like that, while we're doing all of the more strategic stuff with mobility. So we welcome it, and we're just lucky to have jobs and move forward. And like I said, things are looking up in hospitality. So now in the future, you mentioned that point, I think things are going to pick back up. There's no question there's a hunger and appetite for people to get out there and do not just business travel, but get out there and do an international assignment. We're going to have needs for talent to be in different parts of the globe, where you can't hire locally. That's just going to come. I don't foresee any changes with that. It's just that from a crisis perspective or crisis management perspective, we have to be more proactive about how we react, how we handle, and what we can do going forward to work better with our suppliers and reacting to that. But I have to say our suppliers were very, very good throughout in lending a helping hand. So
Mark, what you're basically telling us is that you didn't sleep during 2020. It sounds like you were the whole back end administration for the business. Sorry. Yep.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, it was. And, I wasn't alone in the fact that there were colleagues of mine on U.S. benefits team, folks in our Singapore office. I dealt with a few of our colleagues over in Australia, actually, who were, we were all kind of in it together, just taking on more and more tasks. So I think we all just, at times could get on a Zoom or a meeting and just, share or drown in our sorrows, so to speak.
Cry together.
Yeah, cry
Just in tears.
together. And yeah.
Just to that point, and you said earlier that you can't take on customers' occupancy rates lower, or you've had to make them lower because you didn't have the staff to actually fill the thing, and that is a common theme that we're getting through Asia Pacific as well. I don't think you're alone in that. But I think that the real question to me is really, and it talks to your year that you've had, and that is burnout. Like you talk to mental health. So and I see that there's a lot of people moving into stages of burnout because actually COVID, while a lot of people didn't work and they got the benefits, there were people like you who were really taking on 4 or 5 hats. And then, so how are you going to manage the burnout for yourself, I suppose, but also what are you looking for the team? How are you looking at putting in structures and processes to make sure that you protect those people who you've still got?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge topic and initiative within HR, probably the biggest topic for this year. So as a result of the pandemic, as mental health, anxiety rates, depression rates have skyrocketed as a result. And so what's the response of every company to try and deal with this? Hilton's culture is one that is all about the people, all about doing what we can to make sure that our employees are in good standing so that they can then treat the guests well that they serve on the front line in the hotels. And that lives and breathes the same way for corporate employees like myself that are working in corporate for Hilton. And I can't say enough about the culture. That's what we try and live and breathe. So then it becomes, okay, what are we going to do with mental health? Well, we've come out globally with a number of different resources through a large initiative called Thrive, which really the notion of Thrive is not anything new. It's been around a while, but we've really taken it to heart at Hilton, which means you really have to be aware of taking a break and balancing your work with your life, and that we expect that of you. We don't want you to burn out. We want to make sure that if you need to leave work early, go to the soccer game, go to the gym, we have the full expectation that you're going to keep things moving on your own time. It's not a problem. We have leadership trainings that we send out to all of our big leaders within the company so that they can ensure that they're projecting that and cascading that down amongst middle managers and others. So there's Thrive, but there's a number of different resources that we've shot out to all of our team members to be able to ensure that they have everything that they need. Hotlines, EAP is a huge one, the Employee Assistance Program. So we push that out on our expats, particularly to let them know that there's sometimes this sense of expats who they go on assignment, and so if they do come down with a little bit of let's say anxiety or depression, they may not want to call that hotline because they feel as though that if they call the hotline, they'll be labeled as something and that they're there to do a job, and then their managers are going to think that they weren't suited to do the job. And we say what I just said to our expats so that it provides a little bit of comfort, because I would feel the same way, to be honest with you. I'd feel a little bit ashamed, right? But if somebody tells me like, that's not it at all, like we encourage you to call and to seek help if you're feeling that way, then that really takes an edge off. And so we've been doing that. And then in addition to all those other things, we just continue we have some employees within HR on our team that have come out and made videos where they've really been upfront and honest about anxiety and some of their own stories. And we send these out, and it helps humanize and give people an opportunity to say, wow, they're going through it too. I don't feel alone or as bad. So huge initiative around it. And I think most companies, but particularly with us, with our culture, it's at the front of the line. So, with any function within HR this year, mobility, comp, recruiting, analytics, benefits, any function is being asked to look at what they can do from a mental health aspect and see what we can offer.
I imagine that the mental stress or the pressure and the weight of those individuals, whether they be at the front desk or maybe they're in housekeeping in the back end, the stress on them would be at another level. I can't even imagine working in that environment, what that would be like. Is there any programs that you've put around that? Because I know that is unique to the hospitality and hotel sector. But is there anything specific that you've put around that? And have you had to move people around, specifically the US domestically, to have key people at key locations to manage those particular properties?
Yeah, we've certainly run into a lot of people on the hotel side. I think a lot of our HR directors in the field. And so these are corporate employees that become HR directors that look after various sectors of hotels.
Yeah.
And ensure that, they're operating appropriately from an HR perspective. There certainly has been a lot of, mental stress, especially for those that have had to be in the hotels during the pandemic when it was at its worst, adhere to all the protocols of wearing a mask all day long, walking around and dealing with that, and then seeing, occupancy go from roughly 75% globally on average pre-COVID down to about 10% globally back when April and May of last year. To see just vacancies all over was pretty depressing. So, we cascade our HR initiatives that we're doing at corporate to the hotels that we're supporting, and then those HR professionals at the hotel would kind of be responsible for then enacting that to their employees. Now, one thing I just mentioned is that roughly about 70% of our hotels globally are franchised.
Okay.
So we do not support those hotels from a corporate perspective in any fashion. We would like to, but given the arrangements and the fee structures, it's pretty much that ownership group, whoever owns it and franchises it, and then they use the Hilton name, but they kind of do their own thing otherwise. So we wouldn't know as much about what goes on there, but we do try to ensure that they're enacting initiatives that we do partner and proactively connect with on all the hotels that we manage, which is about 30% of the hotels globally. The last part of your question was around in the U.S. and if we've moved over folks. Yes, the answer is yes. We have had situations where there's been general managers, because we do move our general managers globally, and particularly in APAC, where you guys sit. There's a lot of movement on the hotel operations side, and we call them global nomads. They typically, they're an interesting international assignment type because they don't really have a home country per se. So if my name's John Doe and I'm now a general manager at a Sydney hotel, let's say it's a full service Hilton, I'll probably be general manager there for 3 to 5 years. I may or may not be with my family there. And then maybe I'll bounce over to Singapore and run a hotel there for 4 to 5 years. Then I'll go to Japan and run one there for 3 or 4 years. And then I'll just keep hopping around as a career kind of expat. So a lot of them, it's a little different. They're on host country payroll. They're there locally, but they're getting expat related benefits, including schooling for their children and so forth. What's tended to happen, to answer your question, in the US, and I think in other parts of the world as well, is that when there were hotel closings or there were needs to kind of partner up and see with layoffs and so forth, what we could do. There were a lot of general managers that were doing double duty and maybe clustering up with other hotels to try and provide some support, particularly when we had to go through a number of layoffs. And so we have a lot of what we'd call area general managers that kind of are clusters for pockets of hotels in different areas, and that became much more apparent during the pandemic.
Have you got a strategy, or have you found you've got to start adding additional incentives to move managers or these global nomads to countries that may not have dealt with the pandemic so well, but they're going to come out of it? I think that, obviously, I'm guessing that Australia and New Zealand are quite attractive because, we've I think comparatively we've done it right because we've closed our borders, not because I think we've done the vaccine rollout well, but we have done that. But I just think obviously with so many properties, do you have to, as I said, do you have to give additional incentives to move people into those regions that may not have dealt with it so well?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really tough balance right now for us because there is there is a notion of wanting to give an incentive financially, mostly to get people to perform these roles. But at the same time, right now, we're so big on shedding cost. Everything's about cost. Naturally so, because we've lost a lot over the last year. But with things rounding the corner now, we're in a little bit better financial shape to start going ahead and moving forward on some of these international assignments. But what we've tended to do, and it's funny that you brought that up, Jamie, because I was just on the phone with our Asia Pac colleagues in our Singapore office a couple of weeks ago, and they put together, and they needed our approval, but they put together a kind of a new standardized package that they think they can present out to a lot of our hotel operations people for international assignments going forward. And they want to keep a level of standardization, but also allow some exceptions to occur for just what you were saying, incentive-laden approach. And I think that would be probably tend to be the higher level folks that may try to negotiate in a certain exception that we could potentially be amenable to. But it's a really tough balance because again, we're in the business right now of shedding costs as much as we can from the corporate world. We're trying to help the hotels shed costs. So one of our main jobs in mobility is to structure assignments so that they're cost effective for the businesses. And at the same time, if you don't have somebody who's willing to go unless they get exactly what they want, and it's like, hey, you want me to go all the way over there in the middle of a pandemic and all this and that, you better show me the money, it's a tough one. So we have to balance needs to the business, and usually a lot of those decisions are made way above my pay grade. But we give our recommendations to our leadership, and then once they make the decision, we'll roll with it. And I can safely say that there's been some decisions made that at times I'm perhaps not completely on board with, or if I don't have a choice, but it's like, hey, we're trying to shed costs, but we're going to be paying a $30,000 relocation allowance to just help this person when usually we only give 5,000. But it happens, and that's just part of the structure of some of these assignments. So yeah, great point though. I mean, I think it's just a really tough balance.
Mark, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, we've touched on hotel quarantine from the Hilton's point of view, and obviously I can appreciate, those properties are all being managed individually, and the staff, I guess, have got their own protocols on how they manage that. I wonder though, we have, I guess, broadly speaking, a universal approach to hotel quarantine. I know in Australia specifically, most of the hotel quarantines take place in CBDs, which is a debatable subject at the moment in Australia. But I guess from Hilton's point of view, what are there any kind of tips or guidance that you could give to mobility practitioners that might be watching this podcast around how they can support, or tips that they can give to their expats or the business travelers who are having to work through the quarantine process just due to the nature of their role, and there's no getting around it at the moment?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. I think it's one of the big things I've seen as a result of the quarantines is we've extended temporary living. And so that has not been an issue. We typically would give 30 to 60 days of temporary living due to policy once somebody arrives in country as an expat. Mm-hmm. And we've extended that out to 90 days, maybe even longer, 180 days. 180 days we did a couple of times, for specific folks, just so that they can ensure that they get their feet on the ground. There's no rush to find a place, what have you. Now, was it cost effective? Probably not. But again, back to Jamie's question before, everything became a balance of how we can ensure we take care of the team member while at the same time, looking at cost as well, because it's a double-edged sword in a way. You have to try and manage as best as you can and ensure that the well-being of that team member is there so that they can then do the job and serve our customers. So yeah, it's been so one piece of advice I'd give, like I said, is really try and be flexible as you can around temporary living for folks when they arrive in country, because one of the pain points we started to see was, okay, but then I got to be there in quarantine for 14 days by myself. And then I have to find a place right away. And then all of a sudden it's like, just relax. Don't worry. We're going to extend it. Mm-hmm. You'll have plenty of time. And then the second piece of advice I say is just check in on them as much as possible. When they're alone in that hotel room, let them know about the EAP services we have. Check in with them as a mobility professional, be their eyes and ears back home, and have our suppliers check in with them. One of the other things we did, particularly for our high executives, I wish we did it for everybody, because really everybody should get this, not just our high executives, but we did a lot of welcome gifts for folks that arrived as well, and had those showed up in their temp living or hotel or corporate living or wherever they were, just to put a smile on their face, because they're going through a lot, particularly if it's the ones that were traveling by themselves without their family. So those are probably three things I'd say that we've done successfully and that seem to help when we came across it.
Yeah, I know one of the, and certainly just like everything else, when the programs first came out and the pandemic first started and hotel quarantine first came into existence, one of the big complaints was, there was no fresh air for 14 days. You had a family of 5 in a typical standard sized hotel room. And then, as the governments who are running the programs started to realize that probably wasn't the most humane way to run the program, they started to branch out to service apartments with balconies or courtyards and windows that would open. Is there a particular preference or guide that I guess that Hilton or the hospitality industry uses around, allocating certain rooms to certain types of family? Is there certain things that somebody should say, so to speak, in order to make sure that they're getting something that is suitable for their needs? I mean, I know for me, if I couldn't open a window for 14 days, I think I would go crazy. So. Yeah.
No, we one of the just recent things that we came out with, it was actually just on the news the other day, is, and you guys are probably familiar, whenever you go on a vacation or and you're with a big family and you try and reserve 2 rooms, right? And let's say you have a bigger family, you can't just all fit in one. You try and reserve 2, and you want them to be the connecting rooms, right? Well, think about all the rigmarole and hassle that's been for years and years to try and ensure that you can get 2 connecting rooms. You try and do it online. You try and do it when you call. They mess it up and then when you get there, it's like, well, we don't have anything connecting, but we do have them down the hall from each other. We do have them next to each other or on different floors or whatever. It just never seemed to get there. I've had this frustration for years. We just came out, Hilton, with all our hotels with a very seamless process to ensure that you can get 2 connecting rooms in your reservation without fail. And that's something I think we're really proud of, because it's just a nag that's been there that I think is just an easy one to solve. And we had to go through just, now certainly some of our hotels, our focus service hotels, some of them don't have the ability to have connecting rooms, but the ones that do will get that in place, and it won't be an issue. They can easily do it through reservation and have that option in the reservation. So that should help a bit with preferences and things. I think otherwise throughout the hotels, from what I've heard and seen, I mean, I think everyone's done a pretty good job about being flexible with people that, want to roam throughout the hotel. I mean, they've when things were at their worst, I'd say, last summer, it was, spring into summer. I did actually happen to stay at a couple of Homewood Suites hotels with Hilton, just because I was going to visit some friends, and I was abiding by all that. I was wearing masks, I'm doing the whole. But when I went in and I wanted to see kind of what the experience would be like when it was at its worst, and we had a lot of good protocols in place, social distancing, ensuring. One of the things they did was ensure that they put every hotel, even though occupancy was so low, they would fill up the first floor. It was kind of like an approach that they had, was fill up the first floor first. Reason why is then you don't get people in the elevator next to each other, so get that first floor going so they can just, walk out and be able to not have to take stairs or do the elevators and have to get in with other people and all of that. So that was one big initiative. And then they put together a lot of CleanStay initiatives where they'd go ahead and sanitize a lot of the rooms. And I know we'll talk about that a little more, but they, there were a lot of things that they tried to do to really ensure that they were making guests feel comfortable as possible, given the circumstances. So
just on that point with the quarantine and mobility professionals working with their expats that they're moving along, we had one of our clients who was a C-level person working for one of the surf brands, and he came back into Australia and he asked for his exercise bike and a book, and he wasn't allowed to get them in, which we've found there's sort of been different speeds. I don't know how it is, what your experience is, but there seems to be different hotels with different rules. But as far as like giving the employees sort of, a gift pack or something that can help them along, is there the things that you can get into the hotels, and is there certain things you definitely can't?
I haven't seen where there's things that you can't, and I haven't heard of any situations. Okay. That's interesting that you mentioned that. I haven't myself.
Yeah, I think this one was a harsh experience, right? Because I think that this guy he'd done it a couple of times and he'd had it in previously, and he was just like, "Well, I'm okay." I mean, he's a surfer, right? Like he wants to be in the water. So put him in a room, no balcony, no exercise bike and no book to be delivered. He was like, by the end of it, he was insane.
Yeah. The program certainly, I think the program's certainly come a long way, Jamie. I mean, it's interesting to hear that even still that level of restriction exists, because I mean, when I was bringing people back in March last year, there were no delivery services. So no Uber Eats, no Deliveroo's, what have you. There was certainly no alcohol allowed to be delivered either. So no BWS or any of that sort of stuff. And so family members or friends could drop off a reasonable size, and they kind of used loose language around that, bags of gifts or products. And that would actually be searched before it went up too. So that's kind of, what's that? Almost 18 months ago, we've gone from quite strict restrictions to now. I've seen people who, they can get Uber Eats deliveries. It's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more reasonable. But I think, the experience is so different in every part of the world. I know Mark just mentioned then around people in the US roaming around the hotels. There's no leaving your room in Australia. You're not even allowed out. You're not even allowed to open your door sometimes, unless your food drops off and they knock on your door and say dinner's here. So to that level of difference, it's really interesting. So I'm not surprised that particular piece of equipment was knocked back. I mean, putting aside probably the HSC issues around delivering something like that. But now, I mean, as we're all learning, hotels, with the new variants coming out of the virus, they're now proving quite rightly. I think I heard one of the politicians say they were never built to do something like this, which is completely correct. So we've really just been doing our best with what we've got. So I think it's something where the until purpose-built facilities are made, which is probably a good idea now. I think we're all starting to realize this is, I know it's been said a million times before, but the new normal. I think people realize this is the place, this is the world we're living in. And if we all want to come back and enjoy hotels for what they were intended for in the first place, then I think we need to segregate those two and start forward separately. And I'm sure, lots of the hotels would probably agree with me on that one. No, go ahead, Mark, you're right.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I did hear in certain countries, particularly from some of my colleagues in the UK, that at some countries in Europe also had it that way, where some of the hotels, you would not leave your room at certain points in time for a period of time. I hadn't seen that here in the US. People were allowed to, move around and within the hotel and so forth, as long as they're taking the right protocols. But one thing I will say that I did see was and heard about was that there were a lot of delivery, local restaurants delivery, pizza delivery, all that was restricted and cut off for a while, for a good while, where people could not, outside vendors could not come to the hotels and drop off things like that. That was cut off for a while. It's back now, but I did see that.
And Mark, you touched on really briefly, but I'd like to expand on a little bit, the CleanStay initiatives and the sustainability piece for Hilton. I wonder whether you could talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, we've been, and I've done a couple of panel sessions on this in the past, and on sustainability, which is a great issue. Great issue. I mean, it's a great topic, with which a lot of companies are looking at now. We always kind of combine, and I'd say Hilton's always tried to be ahead of the game in some of this, but we always try to combine it a little bit with corporate social responsibility as well, and what we're doing, not just to ensure that we're going green as much as we can, but also, ensuring that we're helping our communities. And so, number one, with the CleanStay initiative, which we came out with right around the time of COVID when it hit, it was good timing. We ensured that we sort of revamped our process of cleaning rooms. And it's funny that I mentioned that because just recently I stayed at a hotel, and the room they put me in when I got there, it wasn't clean. It was like the bed was all disheveled. There were towels all over the floor and what have you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we just went through this. But no, it was okay. I mean, it was just a common error, but no, for all the ones I've stated otherwise, there's a sticker on the door, CleanStay initiative. It ensures that the rooms are fully sanitized. Everything is washed. like doubly washed, sheets, blankets, all these things. And they've gone through and done a full cavity search of everything in the room. That's just been a much bigger effort surrounding, just ensuring that everything is sanitized and as clean as possible. So every hotel has to abide by that process, and it's a lengthy process. So the housekeepers have been very busy abiding to that, and we feel pretty comfortable about that. We'd advertise it a lot at the hotels. Like I said, every room when you check in will have that sticker on, showing that this room has gone through that process. So there's been that. We've also, tried to do whatever we can to ensure, at the corporate offices and at the hotels, to be as green as we can, without utilizing any paper where we don't need to, and keep everything online as much as possible. We're pretty out there with our communities, wherever we are, globally. We have a strong relationship with a lot of charities, a lot of communities out there where we try to do things to help others. We even have a week globally, where it's sort of a spirit to serve week, where we get out and help different communities with Habitat for Humanity or different organizations that building shelters, things like that. And every employee, hotel, corporate, what have you, we celebrate that 1 week out of every year, to do what we can to give back to communities. And we were named the #1 company to work for in the U.S. a couple of years ago on the Fortune 100, for 2 years in a row. Actually, we were #3 this year, but we took a lot of pride in that, and we felt that it goes hand in hand with sustainability and corporate social responsibility. In the world, we were ranked, I believe, #2 a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of pride that we have in those rankings, and we feel that a lot of it's tied to what we can do to help out our communities out there. But yeah, it's been, sustainability has been a key issue for us, and we just want to make sure we can do whatever we can to ensure that cleanliness, safety, and whatever we can do to help out the environment with whatever we're doing, is at the top of our thought process all the time.
Look, Mark, you've been so generous with your time and with your information. I mean, I think it's been amazing. And now I'm a big believer with every sort of bad thing that happens, there's always, good takeouts. I don't know if you've had time to reflect on what you think is good has come out of COVID, but I'd be quite keen to hear if you had sort of, a top 3 or a top 2 that you really think that has benefited you, benefited the business, benefited the industry. I don't know. I'd just love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, great question. I wasn't prepared for this, but it's a great one that just kind of gets my head thinking a bit. And they have actually, there are leaders of ours that have gone through and talked about some of the inspiring things that have happened. I mean, I think #1 is just kind of, as a team, what we can do through a global crisis. What we can do is just incredibly inspiring, how we came together as a team and did what we could. And I'm sure I probably speak for probably most people at any company or organization, is just seeing what we were able to do, and help our customers and guests. One that really resonated with me was the Zooms and virtual meetings. While many of us are Zoomed out, or we're kind of over the virtual meetings, we want to get back in person. And I've already committed to paying my own way to fly to our worldwide ERC event at the end of September in Chicago, because Hilton's not really paying for much business travel for people at my level, but right now, but I was like, I got to get out and see people and what have you. But one of the things I'd say that really came out of it that was a positive is between our corporate offices, and we have one in Memphis. In the US, we have one in Memphis, Miami, and McLean. And McLean is where our headquarters is, as well as the UK, and like I mentioned, Singapore, Dubai, others. There seem to be, times kind of like a little stigma about corporate headquarters has, that's where it's at, right? The leaders are there, the CEO's there, the executives are there, what have you. So these other offices, it's like, well, we don't get the exposure that you guys had over there. Not around leaders and blah, blah, blah. Then the pandemic hits and now everybody's virtual, right? So everybody's chatting on these screens and meetings. There's nobody in one office or the other or what have you. And it broke down these walls of just this perception of you're at the Taj Mahal in McLean and we're over here in some, podunk, B-rated office or what have you. All of that went by the wayside. It broke down those walls. And many of us in McLean and even Memphis, which is our partner office, and many of the folks belong to the same team. So you'll have a manager that's managing somebody who's in the Memphis office, they work in McLean, or like I said, I manage somebody in the UK. So now we're all in the same playing field, right? So that really resonated, I think, with a lot of people, and broke down those walls, which everybody had been kind of, fighting that perception for a long time, and that broke that down. Now, we were just told we're going back to the office July 19th. And who knows what it's going to look like. I think maybe 2 days a week, 3 days a week to start, something like that. So I hope that doesn't come back, right? That stigma, but I don't think it will. I think this provided the opportunity to really get everybody on the same page. And now there's going to be so much more virtual and Zoom. It's really amazing to me how Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these other companies so quickly after the pandemic hit became these powerful tools that everybody could use that they weren't using right before. The timing on it is just really amazing and impressive to me. But yeah, that's one that I'd say was a real big positive. And then just, like I said, mental health. It was already a big issue. It's never going anywhere. And the fact that people have been much more open about it now, where they weren't before, and they're more comfortable sharing, I think just really helps the world, in a sense, to get a little bit more in front of that and be willing and open to share, and people not feeling as embarrassed to discuss it. So I think it's an unfortunate in terms of the depression rates and anxiety rates going up, but the positive, I think, is that we're talking about it. People are doing things about it, and people are being really, really open about it, which has needed to happen for a long time. And it's like, how do you get there? Well, unfortunately, I think this pandemic brought a lot of it to light. So I would take that as a positive.
I completely agree, Mark, around, the pandemic definitely flattened those hierarchies and those structures, and made the interactions more genuine, and you really know who you work with now, right? At a whole new level. So yeah, I agree. I think those walls, as you put it, I think they'll struggle to get back up, but it's certainly been, to Jamie's point, there's been some positives and some negatives. So it's good that we can all find some silver linings out of all of this. Thank you so much for your time. As Jamie said, you've been very generous with your time and your insights. Really appreciate your time today, and it was really great to speak with you again. You look after yourself, and thanks again. Take care, Mark.
Thank you guys so much, Keryn, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
And one of these days, I'd love to make it out there
I was going to
just
say,
in-
come and visit us. Absolutely.
Maybe not Jamie in Broome.
Hey, no, Mark, this is the spot you've got to come, right? Like, you probably noticed all the 4-wheel drives and caravans going past. Because there's no international travel, it's like every Australian and as we say, every man and his dog have packed up caravans and 4-wheel drives and just going around Australia. So like I'm doing with my family, but there's just the amount of people who have just gone and up and traveled is next level. Finding parts for 4-wheel drives and tires, etc., is difficult. But I tell you, the remote working thing, it's I was saying to Keryn before the show that it's about being adaptable. And making sure that you can adapt to any situation, because
Sure.
I was going to do this in a cafe, and then now we're in Broome in the car park on the beach. But it's definitely come over. You're always welcome. You've got a place with us, so you can always come whenever you like.
That's good.
You can guarantee Jamie will want to stay in a Hilton when he gets back to Melbourne.
Oh yeah, and I can help you guys. I can help you guys out with that. We got a great discount program that we can extend to family and friends. So you just let me know if you ever need a room, and
Awesome.
I'd be happy
you're
to.
on. Hey, I'll do your visa coming in as well. I'll do your visa coming in. We're all square here.
All right, we'll let you get going,
Okay.
Mark. It must be late there. Take care.